Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be walking you through a basic flight tutorial for flying helicopter charter missions. Now helicopter charter missions are a little interesting because of the long distances involved and the fact that you do not have trim on the H-125, for example. That doesn't mean there's a couple things that we can learn, and I'll go ahead and show you that. One thing you'll notice here is we're only looking at 68 miles and about that much fuel. One of the things you can do is you can shut the clouds off. That doesn't make the clouds go away. All it does is make it so you can see your flight. One of the things you want to pay very, very close attention to before you accept any of these missions is if you look at the bottom left corner, you're going to see the estimated distances as well as the weather. You want to be very cautious flying a helicopter in rough weather. You'll see what I mean. Now, there's a lot of useful information that's going to appear here. Obviously, how much they're going to offer you. They're also going to tell you the XP. And of course, something that's very, very helpful is to tell you they're looking for satisfaction, integrity, and airline procedure compliance. Now, the procedure compliance is one of those things that is tricky because they don't actually say what that means. What that really simply means is they're expecting you to get your communications with air traffic control, and they're also expecting you to either get flight following, or what they really would love to see too would be an IFR flight plan if it is relevant for that particular journey. So here we are, looking pretty good. Got my short sleeves on today, kind of a thing. First thing you got to do, of course, is got to get the helicopter ready to rock. You can't skip this step, but it's worth like the 15 experience points that you get for it. So I tell people, don't do that. One of the things you got to watch out for when you click on things, you don't, as you saw, just kind of hit that piece here. The Airbus is a fine helicopter. It's pretty good. Like I said, they chose not to model trim, even though it's got a trim button on the stick. And when you're done with this part, here comes a fun trick. Go ahead and get in and then press Control E immediately. Jump in, Control E. And the reason we're doing that is because when we request boarding, the helicopter will already be starting.
MAO 510 parking 7.
Now, from a safety perspective, this is usually something you probably don't want to do. But the reality is they're going to do the little animation right as this thing starts booting up. And as far as I have seen, I've never received any penalty or anything for actually doing that. So now it gets this like a little dramatic, just kind of like walking up there, climbing to the back there. You can see I'm pretty much ready to rock. It gives us the thumbs up. I'm already half started, my guy.
Captain, you're leaving to Tucson.
Tucson.
I wanted to drop by and say hello before you take off. Remember, today's guest Mrs. Bone is on the go for a business meeting and needs a short and quick transfer to Grand Canyon.
Oh, don't worry. She'll get a short and quick transfer from me.
It should be a piece of cake, and the client will just have to enjoy the view.
Nice. So one of the things I like to do here is that they don't tell you, which is a little obnoxious, is you want to come down here and you have a landing light switch. If you push your landing light switch on your actual joystick, it won't do anything. If you hit this landing light switch, it actually turns on the landing light. And now the reason that's so valuable is a good thing. Okay, so now the next trap. You'll notice that I just announced that I'm taxiing to a helipad. If I attempt to taxi to that helipad, I will get a penalty. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to skip the taxi here. And you've got to listen for that, because what it will do is it'll force you to do really goofy things like cross all sorts of nasty, like, different airports and make you go over runways, and you get a major, major character penalty. So the safest way to avoid that, of course, is to skip that. So we're ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and do a standard takeoff here. I'm going to go ahead and adjust my seat, make sure I'm nice and comfortable. Got to get into my helicopter pose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a look. Looks good to me. Looks good to me. Looks good. All right, let's do it. We're going to go ahead and give everybody a quick wiggle. Go ahead and apply a little bit of right foot, and we're just waiting for everything to settle. Now we're going to be doing a high power takeoff here, so we're just going to go up, and we're just going to go. One of the things you want to watch out for in the bottom left corner is going to be your torque. We're at high altitude here. Looks like we have a nasty crosswind, nothing new there, and we're just going to enjoy this beautiful sight here. Now, in the real world, looks awfully nasty, flying over the crop like this, but that's perfectly fine for us because we're enjoying our nice little mission. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of level ourselves off and start making our way in that general direction. Now, as you're operating this helicopter, there's a couple things you want to kind of pay attention to. And again, we'll do a detailed helicopter video for you later on. First of all, of course, is going to be the amount of torque that you're using at this given time. You can see right now I'm just chilling there about 6 torque. Of course, it's not 6 torque. It's going to be times. You'll notice if I increase my collective, you're going to watch my torque amount go up. You'll also notice that a couple other gauges are going to come up as well. Generally, you're going to need torque for any sort of very, very high power operations. Next thing we want to pay attention to is going to be down here. Is going to be our lovely, lovely, lovely airspeed. And you can see here we're sitting at about 45 knots. We're going to be building up airspeed. The cruise speed for this is about 125. If you're doing anything faster than that, you're going pretty quick. Now, one of the things you also want to pay attention to is if you look really carefully. You see the little string? Now, if you go play with your anti-torque pedals, you'll notice that the string starts doing a little happy dance. The purpose of that little string there is to tell you if you are flying properly in a straight line. Remember, helicopters will skid because of the incredible torque that they produce. So let's go ahead and get ourselves some flight following here. And remember, by requesting flight following, you're going to get that full credit when it comes to doing that last piece.
5,600 feet. Request flight following.
Red Mike Alpha Oscar 510.
Now, the nice thing is, because we're in Flight Sim, when I approve of this, it's going to automatically toss that over into my transponder.
7541 Red Mike Alpha Oscar 510.
Now, we're in their system.
Oscar 510 radar contact 2 miles northeast of 5 Alpha Zulu 5,800 feet, altimeter 29er. 9er2.
So all we're going to do is acknowledge the radar contact, and now, because we have set ourselves up on this plan, we are now good to go. We can actually switch over to an IFR clearance, but that's actually not required. Now, here's where the magic is going to happen here. We cannot bump into any of the clouds, but there's nothing stopping us from going ahead and changing what our current acceleration is. Now, if I needed fuel, by the way, I've already showed this in a previous video, but you can actually bind it to a key, go ahead and press a button, and bam, now you've got yourself a little bit more fuel if you ever start running low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself 3 taps of time acceleration.
Sure, I did tell you.
Now, what you're noticing is my helicopter is going all over the place here. And that's actually not that big of a deal. You will not receive any specific penalties for letting it kind of wander like that. You will definitely receive penalties, however, if you bump into that big nasty set of clouds that's just right there.
She'll be there too. Fine.
Now remember, you do not have trim with this helicopter, so as you're cruising around, you're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Remember, the faster you go, the more forward pressure you're going to have to put on the controls. Sometimes it's easier to basically skip that part and go ahead and make it easier for you. She's going to have this fun little conversation this whole time, and basically all you have to worry about is keeping us in a straight line. I'll skip this part, though. Now, it's important to know that when you're doing flight following, if you're ever called, you've got to slow your time down and respond immediately. You will take a penalty if you do not respond quick enough.
Shortly now. Okay. Noted.
So what you're going to notice here is it's going to now say connect to arrival airport via ATC or press enter. Now, if we wanted to, we could actually give them a quick call. So we have Grand Canyon Village Airport and we have Grand Canyon National Park. Now, one of the interesting things here is when you're setting up your flight originally, you need to know which one we're actually going for. But if you're ever in doubt, we can always press that enter key, and what it will attempt to do is contact automatically. So you can see there it switched over to the appropriate frequency. Now, if I were to press enter again, you'll notice here that it goes ahead and does everything we need it to do.
Alpha Oscar 510 is 8 miles south 8,300 feet with India to land.
Apparently I brought India with me.
Red Mike Alpha Oscar 510 Canyon Tower, altimeter 29er. 9er2 enter left base runway tree.
All right, so we've got the critical information here. They told us that we need to do a left base for runway 3, which makes it a little bit easier, but we still have to get down there. Now, the next mistake a lot of folks make when they're first playing around with these missions is they accidentally descend too quickly. That is definitely a surefire way to lose some happiness points on the point of the customer. It's actually pretty amusing because they start screaming in your ear, which I guess if that's your objective, you can definitely do that. We'll get a little closer. All right, here comes the tricky part. So a lot of times you're going to be flying to places you've never seen before. So if I actually look out my window here, you can see where they're trying to get us to land is over there, even though that's the runway. So one of the things you have to be very, very mindful of when you're doing any of these approaches to pay very, very close attention to what they're asking you to do. Do not forget to tell the passengers you're landing.
Granted permission to land. Please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened as we prepare for our arrival.
So when you land this helicopter, the way that Flight Sim detects things now is way too sensitive. So it says right now that what I'm supposed to do is basically plop this thing right at the end of the runway. Don't do that. If you do that, what will happen is you'll get a penalty for landing off airport once you get low enough to the ground. I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me during my little experiences with the career. Realistically, what you're trying to do is get yourself close to the terminal on the runway. I'll show you what I mean when we get a little closer. So just like all helicopters, we're going to be entering right patterns, not left patterns, but that's okay because that's what they asked us to do. You do not need to perfectly fly inside those squares. There's no specific penalty if you do not. Obviously, you still need to safely get the helicopter on the ground. Okay. Resist the urge. Resist the urge. Do you see how it says to fly to the helipad? Now, the reason you be busted here and watch me lose points for this is the fact that you're like, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and land on the runway. But if you land on the runway, what you will do is you will get a penalty for landing on the runway, even though it is the helipad that we're trying to achieve. So the trick here is if you just noticed a second ago, I strafed off of the runway itself. This is just one of those obnoxious things that they're still working on these days, trying to fix, I'm sure. But if you were to plop on the runway, you get a nasty penalty. If you fly over the runway, you get a nasty penalty. If you fly over the taxiway, you get a nasty penalty. The other thing you need to do is make sure your altitude is going to be high enough as you're doing this. So as I'm kind of scooting along at 60 knots here, you're noticing I'm staying pretty safe and pretty clear of the ground. If I did not do that, you'd also, like I said, get that off-airport landing penalty. I guess really this is a video on how not to get penalized for helicopter flying in Flight Sim, but I think it works perfectly fine too. So what we're going to do, of course, is we're going to take into account all the usual goodness with all those admonitions. I think a bird just flew by, but that's okay. Is that a bird? What is that? I don't know what I was just looking at. I'm not going to worry about it. So now we're going to go ahead and start slowing down. There's our helipad there. And of course, we always want to be landing properly with the wind and all that good stuff. But again, if we attempt that, we will get penalized. Again, they're teaching us bad habits. The good news is if you look at the wind, though, the wind's basically coming out of my right shoulder. So that actually makes this a very easy approach for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start bringing my collective down a little bit. Remember, we don't push nose forward on a helicopter. That's how we chop our tail off. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to let that wind, just like on a boat, just sort of carry me. There we go. We're going to transition into basically some strafing here. Again, the penalty will hit you if you land anywhere not on that pad. There we go. I'm going to get the penalty. I'm calling it right now. There we go. Do not settle down until you are properly on the pad. There we go. We're transitioning. Got a really nasty crosswind now. Makes our life a little bit simpler, but that's okay. So this is the danger. You have a very, very strong tendency to want to just sink here. If you do that, like I said, you will get zinged. Excuse me for a moment as I actually fly the helicopter. Whew, feel that. See it? See it? You will get that almost every time.
Mike Alpha Oscar 5, 10, please acknowledge. Red Mike Alpha Oscar 5, 10 contact ground on 121.
Now notice, even though I flew the helicopter correctly, you still get the penalty. Welcome to helicopter flying, everyone. I guess what I would have had to have done is come in and drop vertically, which is extremely dangerous. Now notice right now it says stop at hold short. It expects me to land over there now, even though I safely landed the helicopter over here. Sigh. So my big piece of advice here is when it does give you the opportunity to come back, one of the things you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to go ahead and skip that taxi. It's the only safe way that you're going to be doing anything that is going to be at any sort of controlled airport. When this happens, by the way, go ahead and press Control-Shift-D. You can go ahead and hold the space bar to engage the rotor brake. You can also just grab it by hand and let that go, and then you will have yourself a successful mission. Ah, helicopter flying is fun, isn't it? Enjoy.